Hi everyone, we are
Hi.
back with the Databricks Release Notes podcast, now with a new setup. And I have Gábor with me.
Hi.
And my name is Benedek, and we're going to talk about the most important release notes about Databricks.
Lots to cover today as well.
There's a lot to cover.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's start with one thing that we kind of already talked about last time. We discussed that there's new Databricks Apps UI, and now there is already a new navigation interface for Databricks Apps. If we go back to the workspace, now what you can see on my screen is really this new UI. And you can look at this button. Now it has an own interface for Databricks Apps. You know, it started all with Databricks 1, that providing a seamless interface to navigate in the Databricks 1 UI. And then lake-based Postgres came into the picture to streamline the management of the OLTP databases. And now Databricks Apps also have a separate UI interface. So pretty cool. Otherwise, from the technical background, nothing has changed, but probably it's much easier now to navigate within your applications.
Yeah, and you can also see the shift that Databricks has taken. For many, many years, it was mostly just what we now call the Lakehouse. That was the main interface. Maybe new elements were added, but now, suddenly in the span of 5 months, we have 4 interfaces, that we can interact. So that's definitely a shift you can notice, yeah. Speaking of shifts and speaking of new things to remember and new things that Databricks has blessed us with, we have AI Gateway being renamed to Unity AI Gateway. Now, this follows a trend that Databricks likes to have, which is constantly renaming things just to keep us on our toes, especially us trainers, since we have to remember everything and use the new names. This also comes with a larger shift in Databricks' approach to the AI gateway that previously existed. Now we actually will see more integration with Unity Catalog. So this is where Unity AI Gateway is coming from. Eventually, all permission systems will be managed by Unity Catalog. This is not the case for now.
Actually, I think it makes sense, to be honest, because what was available in the AI Gateway is more like governing all of those endpoints, like rate limiting, guardrails on top of the endpoints. So I think that makes sense to talk about it.
Yep. And you can already see it in the existing Lakehouse UI, to be specific. It's now called Unity AI Gateway. Some more news around the AI functionalities of Databricks. You can now use Opus 4.7 as a Databricks-hosted model, which is the latest and greatest from Claude. Also, you're no longer going to incur charges for any empty vector search endpoints that you have. That is great news for someone like me who usually forgets anything that I deployed, for example, vector search endpoints, lake bases, and apps as well. So now I don't have to sweat when the bill comes at the end of the month, at least for vector search endpoints.
Yeah. Speaking of monitoring, it is always important to look through all the resources that you provision. And now I think that's a little bit enlightening that we will not be charged by non-used but existing vector search endpoints.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
I have some other interesting news. In the Catalog Explorer, there was always a feature that you could generate the comments on your table, which existed quite a while. It used to use the Databricks assistant to generate the notes. It's just a built-in feature to analyze the data and give some description. Now it's very nice, and actually it has become more important since AI agents are using this data, because this information is important for them to understand if this data is relevant for the use case. Now it has a great update. The update means that now you can generate these descriptions in different languages. So now there are a couple of languages available. Sadly, Hungarian is not included here.
Yes.
But we have other very important languages like English, German, Spanish, French, Italian. We have here Japanese, Korean, Portuguese in 2 versions, and then 3 different Chinese dialects.
Yeah. And if those are not Chinese dialects but different Chinese languages, then we are sorry. We cannot read those scripts, sadly, but we are always discovering new things. Another news from the not so good column of those news is that BI compatibility mode was removed from the Databricks Power BI connector. That means that you can no longer use metric views inside your Power BI, and it's no longer able to view them, you're no longer able to access them easily. Sadly, this was a Microsoft decision, and Databricks does recommend people, if you're interested in restoring this functionality, to effectively vote and provide feedback on the Fabric Ideas forum. It's actually a great, it's a great loss, because metric views are really, really cool if you want to design end-user facing semantic model-like features, but of course Microsoft and Power BI specifically already has semantic models that you can use, which is a very similar functionality, so it's an understandable move from their part.
Yeah, on the other hand, it was quite debated on LinkedIn, I guess, that, okay, this is a sad thing, it's a political move from Microsoft to remove that functionality, and very funny is that in the release notes, Databricks says, to request restored support for Databricks Metric reviews, please vote and feedback on the Fabric Ideas community post. Okay, so please go ahead, do that, and let's see if Microsoft puts it back. There's another useful connection that has been announced by Databricks. Now you can connect to Databricks from Lovable Apps directly. Now, if you haven't used Lovable before, it's a very nice and easy tool to create UIs using, of course, agentic AI. It's pretty fast. You can build amazing UIs, and now they have a built-in connector. So if you're running and hosting your apps in Lovable, you can just go into and set up Databricks as a resource. It will manage the connection. You can set up the authentication, and it will work fine. So practically, you can access your data within the Lovable hosted application from Databricks. So very nice addition. By the way, if you're using Lovable to create applications, it is also an option to host those applications later on Databricks Apps. So this is an option you might want to consider if you don't want to use Lovable hosting directly. And I think they play a good combination for generating data applications and hosting them on Databricks. So cool.
Yeah, especially if you're vibe coding, you can easily forget important tokens and keys in your code before you commit. With this new feature, effectively, instead you get OAuth, machine-to-machine authentication. It's much safer and much easier for you to manage that. And if you don't know, you don't exactly understand every part of how an authentication system works, it's going to be much easier to connect to your existing lakehouse.
We have one GA announcement. Governed tags are now generally available. Governed tags you will find under Unity Catalog UI. So you go to the Catalog UI, and here there's a relatively new button, Govern, and you can go to Governed tags. We have already talked about the governed tags. They are used in the domain specification as well as in managing what gets automatically tagged. So they are cool things. Now they're generally available, which means everyone can go ahead and use them.
Yeah, you can see the fast iteration of Databricks here on display. We just recently talked about many features coming to governed tags and how they will fit into the larger ecosystem. Now the core functionality is GA already. Something else that is GA, we have the ability to add log destinations to compute. We had this functionality for a while now. Obviously, when you work with classic compute, sometimes those computes are running for months, if not years on end. You need a way to persist those logs. Otherwise, the virtual machine's internal disk would be filled with logs, and you wouldn't be able to search through them. So far, you've been only able to use the default storage medium of your provider. For example, I have S3 here, or you could opt out entirely, or you could use the legacy option of DBFS, which is Databricks File System. But now volumes as an option is also GA, so you can just set up and point to a volume, and your logs will automatically be saved there for future log searching and post-mortem researches that you might want to do on those logs, or if you're just curious about what's happening inside your classic compute clusters.
Cool, thank you. Now there is something I want to share now, which has finally become public preview, and this is the Lakeflow Designer. So Lakeflow Designer was announced in the last summit, and I was waiting for it quite a long time to be available in public preview. Now everyone can have a look at it. It was private preview until now. I think as of today or in the recent days, so probably when you watch the video, it's already a couple of days. but now you can go ahead and enable it through the previews. So go ahead in the workspace previews, enable the Lakeflow Designer. And once you have done it, now you can go into Lakeflow Designer and start designing pipelines. You can just simply go into New and go to Visual Data Prep. I don't know why it is called like that, but let's give it a try. So
sure.
I would like to analyze the flight delays from the Skyflow. Okay, we have now selector, Skyflow events table. Okay,
we'll see what
so
happens.
the idea here is that you have all these options here to use as source, for aggregation, for filtering, whatever you would do normally in SQL language. This will build the UI for you, and you can drag and drop all across the full flow of the pipeline. So I'm super enthusiastic about this, although I really like writing SQL, writing code myself, but we will see how Lakeflow Designer helps in authoring pipelines using a visual interface.
Yeah, and we talked about Microsoft cutting off PowerBI connectors. Databricks has effectively fired back with our very own Databricks Fabric, and a very similar functionality to what the Fabric visual UI were able to do, or is able to do for a bit now. We'll see, which one people like more. If you're running Databricks now, you may have another reason to stay in Databricks as well.
We'll see.
Yep. Another new Lakeflow update is that right now the query-based connectors for Lakeflow Connect are in public preview. That means that previously, if you wanted to connect to an existing source like a Oracle database or a SQL server, what you did effectively, you had to have some kind of CDC kind of permission set up on the original source, but now you're effectively able to query those data sources with a cursor-based query tool. So effectively, if you're writing SQL directly into those sources, this is a shift in how Lakeflow Connect approaches outside data sources, and will potentially make your setup of those connections a little bit easier. So if you don't have CDC or something equivalent to that setup in those data sources, then you're still able to query effectively.
Which is practically adding to the features of Lakeflow Connect.
Yes, absolutely. There is also a new set of breaking changes coming to Lakeflow Declarative Pipelines, or Lakeflow Spark Declarative Pipelines. If you have used the Lakeflow Spark pipelines before, you might remember, or you might remember the frustration that you had with potentially losing the tables, the streaming tables, materialized views that you have created when deleting a pipeline. Now, that's going to be an option now. The new version of this API has a new query parameter called cascade, which will enable you to effectively say, do you want to store those streaming tables and materialized views even when you delete the pipeline itself? Or do you want to throw out the, whatever is it called, throw out the child with the bathwater, I think it's called. Yeah. So throw everything out with the bathwater. This is a new feature. This is in beta, and the default behavior is also expected to change. So eventually you can, I think it's going to be, Cascade is going to be enabled as default, so you won't delete your tables and materialized views by default when you delete a pipeline.
I heard colleagues complaining about this feature. So when they deleted the pipeline, it already deleted the tables. I think originally it made sense when the tables were fully managed inside the pipeline, when it was still called Data Live Tables at the beginning. But once the direct publishing mode was enabled, so you can create tables outside of the pipeline, I think this behavior just simply didn't make sense anymore. So I think this is a good, important change. So it's more like what you would expect. The last one for today is that now you can create and write Unity catalog tables from external Delta clients, which is, again, very nice. Now you can interact with Unity catalog tables. So far, this option was available using Iceberg clients. Iceberg clients could write already Unity catalog tables, but now also Delta clients support this feature. So very cool. Again, this is a little bit opening up the possibility to write into Unity catalog using other engines. So Databricks is not only restricting the write or access to the data from within their engine. So I really appreciate this. And since they are committed to open source and making it available across platform, I really appreciate this move.
I would also like to add that I think you were able to do this with you were able to do this with external tables before. I'm not 100%. What's definitely a new feature here is that this applies to managed tables. Managed tables, as their name implies, were supposed to and are managed by Unity Catalog fully, yet you are able to write, for example, with an external, your own custom Spark. If you have that, you're able to write to those managed tables now directly and query from them.
I would like to highlight one important thing. You would need to enable catalog managed commits,
Yes.
which is an interesting topic. We might come back to that, but this is something that you need to enable so that the catalog is able to manage the commit within the tables, which is practically you're fully avoiding the direct access to the files under hood. So that's a requirement, but other than that, I think it's a really good extra option.
Yeah.
So that's it for today. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned. We will come back with the next episode with a lot of things to talk about.
Yes.
So enjoy your day, and thank you for listening.
Thank
Cheers.
you. Bye.